So you're a medical doctor.
Yes,
Okay.
MD. Yes.
All right. That's good to know. Now, you are a vegan for how many years now?
Going on 13 years. And she said, Dr. Marbus, meat and dairy upset my stomach. And I said, okay, well, let's stop eat the meat and dairy and we'll have you come back in 30 days and see how you're doing. The China study came up in my Google search and I ordered that book. I read it like in 2 days after it arrived. And during that time, I'm sitting on the floor reading the book because I was so engrossed. They were literally turning off and on cancer by food. And so when she came back in 2 weeks, her CRP had dropped almost 300%. It was just outside normal, like 0.1. And she had lost 8 pounds. Her headaches were gone. She went on to lose 50 pounds, stopped 7 to 12 of her medications, and did very, very well. And
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. We have a great guest on today. This is Lori. She's a doctor, Lori Marvelous. She has a great YouTube channel. There's some great information. So I'm going to put that link below. I want everyone to check it out. But I was blown away by the information, and I wanted to get the background on Lori here. So, Lori, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So before we get into some questions I have for you, can you give us a brief background on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. My name is Lori Marbus, and I'm a family and lifestyle medicine physician. I'm board certified. I've been a physician for a couple of decades now, and I was active duty Air Force. I trained in Texas at Texas Tech, and I don't know if you want me to go into the story of why I went plant based, but
Well,
yeah. So
I'm gonna
that's
ask you that question in a moment, but just
okay.
give us your background
It
first.
usually follows the whole thing. But yeah, no, I was active duty Air Force. I'm licensed in all 50 states. I see patients via telemedicine currently for the last 7 years or so.
Okay, wonderful. So you're a medical doctor.
Yes,
Okay,
MD. Yes.
all right. That's good to know. Now, you are a vegan for how many years now?
I'm going on 13 years.
Wow. So growing up, were you interested in being a vegan when you got older? Like, how was your health? Were you sick as a little child, or how'd you grow up?
No, I was pretty healthy actually. I mean, I had some constipation. I think it was from the dairy that we ate, but we grew up in a home that didn't have a lot of money, so we grew a lot of our own food. So we always had vegetables and fruits and things that were in season, and we ate a lot of whole foods. We ate a ton of beans. I mean, I don't remember a day going by that we didn't eat beans because they were cheap, potatoes and stuff. But we did eat meat and some dairy, but it wasn't a significant portion of my diet. So I was very fortunate in that aspect, and so I was actually very healthy growing up. And then went on to college and got married and had our own kiddos, who are all grown up now. But we ate fairly well just because honestly we didn't have the financial means to buy any processed foods. So that
Well,
worked out.
how old? Well, 13 years ago, when you switched over to a vegan diet, what made you decide to go to a vegan diet 13 years ago?
Yeah, so 13 years ago, I had gotten out of the military and we were living in Colorado in a town called Rifle, Colorado. Of all places to go vegan is a town called Rifle, Colorado in the mountains of Colorado. It doesn't happen very often there, but I was working in a little hospital called Grand River and had a patient come to see me one day. And she said, Dr. Marbus, meat and dairy upset my stomach. And I said, okay, well, let's stop eat the meat and dairy and we'll have you come back in 30 days and see how you're doing. Now, I intuitively understood in my head that there were obviously other foods that she could consume. And but it didn't dawn on me that this was a plant-based diet or a vegan diet. I mean, I just honestly, I just stop the meat and dairy and you'll be okay and come back and we'll see how you're doing. And when she came back in 30 days, what was interesting is she brought her 16-year-old daughter with her. And during that visit, I mean, just to remind you, this was on a weekday. So she made her daughter miss school to come to her appointment. And so I thought I was going to have some type of conversation with the daughter, that parents don't want to have with their teenagers. But what was interesting, she said, tell Dr. Marbus what you did. And before she even told me how she was doing, She goes, well, I wanted to help my mom, with this dietary change. And back then in, early 2012, um, especially in Rifle, Colorado, there were no vegan restaurants or anything like that. So they would have to go to the grocery store. They had to prepare their food at home. So there's that. So they're not buying these processed meals because back then we didn't have all the processed vegan stuff either. Really they were eating whole plant foods. And what happened was she goes, I wanted to help my mom. So I started cooking this way and eating this way with her. And I felt so good that I stopped both my attention deficit disorder medications. And I said, really? And she goes, her mom looked at me and she goes, yeah, why was she able to do that? I said, I don't know, but that's the coolest thing I ever heard. And so, what happened was the mom was doing better and they continued to do well. And the daughter went on to graduate high school 2 years later, completely plant based. And well, what was really got my attention though was why was someone able to stop these medications in a matter of 30 days, just by dietary changes alone? And granted, I understood the value of exercise and eating healthy and not junk food, but I didn't really quite understand the nuances of a whole food plant-based diet, obviously. And what was interesting, I went straight to Google, of course, and the China study came up in my Google search. And I ordered that book. I read it like in 2 days after it arrived. And during that time, I'm sitting on the floor reading the book because I was so engrossed that they were literally turning off and on cancer by food. And my husband would walk by and I was like, look, they're turning out cancer with plants. And he's like, okay. And what was interesting was I was like, wow, I really want to do this, but I'm not quite sure how to proceed. And how am I going to do this also with my patients, right? Because I saw such huge potential. And I was like, man. And so I thought, let me continue to do more research and try to figure out how to kind of bring this all together in practice because they didn't have a lot of the resources back then. And so I had a lupus patient. I had a patient that came in and I really wanted to try this one more time as well. So I had really like strong convictions of going plant-based. And 2 weeks later, a patient came in who had lupus. Now, lupus can be quite a severe disease, even terminal in some cases. It's a severe autoimmune disease where the body attacks itself. And has a lot of a variety of symptoms. And she was 50 pounds overweight. She was on a lot of immune suppressant medications like high doses of prednisone, methotrexate. And to be frank, she was on 12 different medications, severe headaches most days of the week. And she came to see me and she was, Dr. Mars, I'm not sure I can keep working. Here's a young woman who was younger than me at the time. And, she wasn't even going to be able to work to support her family. And as she was talking to me, I was like, yep, this is the one. This is the one I need to try this on. So, in a small town in rural America, there's not a whole lot of specialists. So when you have someone that comes in with rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or anything like that, many times the family medicine physician is the first line of defense. Like we do a lot more than typically maybe in an urban setting would be. And I love that. That's how I was trained and trained in rural Texas. I was active duty Air Force. I mean, we just did a lot. And so I was already thinking in my head what the medications that she was on. She was already on quite a few medications or had failed other medications. And I said, well, what do you think about changing your diet? She goes, I said, I don't think there's a whole lot of medications I can offer you right now, but would you be willing to change what's on the end of your fork? And she said, yeah, absolutely. So luckily for us, I also ordered a CRP, which is an inflammatory marker in the blood. And hers was 300% high normal. So I mean, 3 times high normal. And I said, okay, here's, what I know. I don't know a whole lot, but I do know this. And kind of gave her some very basic instructions. I said, come back in 2 weeks and we'll see how you're doing. And so when she came back in 2 weeks, her CRP had dropped almost 300%. It was just outside normal, like zero point 0.1. And she had lost 8 pounds. Her headaches were gone. And if you fast forward just in her case alone, she went on to lose 50 pounds, stopped 7 to 12 of her medications, and did very, very well. And so um, at that point, at that 2 week point when her inflammatory markers had dropped, I I said, that's it. We're going home and we're going plant-based overnight. Because I'd already been reading and trying to gather as much information as I could about more of the practice, how to move forward. Because my family, I had three teenagers at the time. They were 13, 15, and 18, and my husband. And I was like, I don't know what we're gonna do, but this is what we're going to do. I was like, I'm not quite sure how they'll take it, but they'll do okay because I do all the cooking. So we went home and I went home and I remember putting down my purse. It was a Friday evening and I took a garbage bag and I gathered anything that came from an animal and I threw out what was in my house. The milk, the cheese, the meat. It did not matter to me the amount of money it spent. It was like I can't do this. So I put it in the trash, but I had a quarter um, of a grass-fed beef in my freezer because in rural Colorado, that was like the thing, right? You eat grass-fed meat because it's supposedly healthier. And anyway, that night when I so that's looming in my brain, going, what am I going to do with this very large carcass? And I didn't know quite yet what to do, but when I told my husband and my family, I was like, "Hey, we're going on a plant-based diet." My kids are like, "Mom's on another wild she'll get over it. She goes down these weird paths and back around." Um, and my husband's like, "Well, are you gonna keep cooking?" He's like, "Okay, whatever." And so, we're pretty flexible family. We'd already eaten a lot, pretty healthy anyway. But it was really fascinating. So, my daughter went off to college right that summer, so I didn't get my hands in her as much. But my boys and my husband, it was really interesting. My husband lost quite a bit of weight because we'd been married how long then? I don't know, 20 years at that point. And over the years, he gained weight and he had lost it. My boys went on to run cross country, play basketball, swim. They did all sorts of sports. They did great. Everybody's plant based still, even my daughter. I'd say 98% of the time. My boys are for sure. And they're 30, 28, and almost 26 now. And my husband and I are both still fully whole food plant based. And so that was the change. But what's interesting, to get back to that quarter of grass fed beef in my freezer, 2 days later we went to church and we came home and the freezer had somewhere in the middle of, I don't know if it was that day or the day before, broke. And there was mm, there was liquid and the odor of decaying carcass in the garage. And my husband was like, if you hadn't been with me, I'm pretty sure that you would have unplugged that freezer. I was like, I was like, this is a sign from the big man upstairs, the universe, the conscious, whatever you want to call it, that we're done with meat and we haven't eaten meat or dairy since. And so that was literally the entry point into a vegan diet, and went on to work with some amazing patients who were very patient with me as I learned. And I read some Dr. McDougall articles. Dr. Greger had his site up. But outside of that, it was a lot of just learning over the course of a year or so and creating my own resources and diving deeper into the science and the research, and coming across the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, which is very plant forward, the Plantation Project, and connecting with other physicians who've been doing this for a much longer time. And then going on to develop some other things. I started a company called Plant Based Telehealth, and then we sold it to John Mackey, who had started Whole Foods. And just really trying to understand how we can create other opportunities, because there's so many physicians who are really interested in doing this work now. So, but that was a story.
Amazing story. I have so many questions for you, and thank you for
Okay.
sharing that. So, one question I have is, so prior to 13 years ago, this happening with your patients, had you ever heard something like this before, or this was the first time? Like, because most doctors might have heard it, but like say, "Oh, that's just not true." I know firsthand because when I was young, I had ulcerative colitis. I went to the doctor, and they specifically told me there's nothing that shows there's a connection between colitis and your diet. And I know that's 100% wrong because for the last 30 years, I've been helping people with colitis who have a bad diet. So, like, did you know as a doctor, or did you just ignore it, or did you just never hear of something like this?
No, honestly, I had never heard of it. I mean, I remember when I would during my training, the things you learn about nutrition were deficiencies, like right, vitamin D deficiency and rickets, or scurvy with vitamin C deficiency. So there were those type of things, elements, but never understanding the foundational components of the inputs that will create a healthy human, and outside of exercise. But even then, they didn't give you explicit exercise regimens to provide to your patient, or make sure that they're hitting outside of the national guidelines. Oh, hit 150 minutes of exercise per week, things like that, or have 5 to 7 fruits and
Amazing.
vegetables per day. But they never really get into it. Yeah. So honestly, between when I graduated college, I got married and we had my daughter right before our first anniversary. And then I had two more kids, and I went to medical school with three kids. I did an MBA, MBA, and then on to residency, active duty. And honestly, I didn't have time to think most days, much less dive more into the research. But it was a patient who allowed me to really just be confronted with, that evidence was in her own life. And so I can't ignore that. I mean, I'm not going to ignore someone saying, "Oh, I came across a new medication that saved a life." Why would I ignore something as so amazing, as it's so simple, without side effects or expense outside of, eating and buying some food, or growing your own food. But the piece here that was so astounding to me was how quickly someone got well, and really just turned my entire paradigm of how to practice medicine on its head. And so um I just really understand the need here is to stay humble in our approach to anything in life, and just understand we don't have all the answers all the time. And if you think you do, you're going to be dangerous to someone, just because it's malpractice not to offer a medication that may save someone. It's also malpractice not to offer lifestyle interventions like a whole food plant-based diet, or exercise, or other lifestyle factors that could have significant impact on someone's quality of life and life extension. So that is the important thing here. The lesson for me was to always remain humble in my opinions and my thoughts, and always be open minded, and of course do my due diligence and research, and but not be afraid to dive into something, because just because I had an opinion doesn't mean it can't change. My opinion is not the absolute truth. So again, everyone that we come across will have some, there's something there that we can always learn. And yeah, so that is, oh, it led me down this path, and it's been amazing. I'm still in the rabbit hole. I dove in and have yet to emerge.
Okay, well, so you are a very bright person, obviously. So when you were going to church, I don't know if you still go to church, but you mentioned you went to church back then. So when you were going to church, do you still go to church?
Mhm.
Good, good.
Um, Less so now. I mean, I've really taken a spiritual journey as well. I mean, I still believe in God, and Jesus was a manifestation. For me, my religious background had an amazing mm, input in the person that I am now. But as far as biblical scripture, absolutely, I understand. The perfect
Okay.
diet
That's
was a
yeah,
plant-based
that's what
diet.
I'm gonna say. When you were
And
going
so,
there, did you not read Genesis 129 before? Like,
mhm,
it talked about diet, or
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And understanding that after the flood, and that's when they started eating animals. But in my own life, I consider that contextual, right? So when you read scripture, um, understanding the context of that time of that scripture. And so never really thinking about how to apply that to my life. But again, I was healthy, right? So I wasn't searching
exactly. Okay.
for another way of, trying to seek a solution. So but there, looking back, I certainly see times in my life where that message was coming across. And I think, you have to be in a place of acceptance, and then integration into your life. And then as you move along, those things become more and more obvious, right? And so, yeah, it's been really a fascinating journey. And then you share this message with colleagues. So that'd have been another interesting thing. If I had a colleague approach me and say, "Hey, this is what happened to me," that would have been even more astounding. But even what's interesting is, even if I've had conversations with other physicians, some are very open to it. but it's interesting. You get two things happen. One, they're like, that's great. I could never do it. So then they would just say, well, I can't provide that to my patients because I could never do it. Or two, they want to provide this information to their patients, but they don't educate themselves on how to help their patients become successful. Or they're like, my patients will never change, right? So they don't ever offer it. It's like, my patients aren't going to change their diet. I was like, well, who are you to say that they can't? um, but again, people are, doctors are human just like everybody else, and they have their own beliefs and problems and struggles, and but luckily, I was just very fortunate that this patient came to me when she did, and I was just in a place of openness,
Perfect timing.
which
Yes.
again, I think yeah, and I think the main thing, whether I'd gone plant-based or not, is keeping an open mind, and that will just do you well in many aspects of your life. And so, but at this point, I'll be 54 in October. I feel great. I would encourage everyone to continue, down that path if they're not well, to keep seeking answers, and just incorporating more of the plant foods, the foods that we're people think as humans that we're outside of nature, right? That we're separate, that we can control it, we can do whatever we want. That is just not the way it works. We're very much involved with nature. We actually have a much higher responsibility, I think, as human beings to care for the world and earth and the animals and everything else. So I know I have become a different person. I hope we're better for the better, but again, the growth that occurs is not just physical, but it's mental, it's spiritual. Um, there's so much that goes on, and there's so much that changes when you start embracing this way of
Absolutely.
eating. So you just can't ignore it. And when I speak to my patients, so many of them, seek this type of way of eating because they're seeking health, right? They're dealing with type 2 diabetes or weight loss or inflammatory bowel disease like yourself. And what's so fascinating is they'll they'll have such an amazing impact on their health by embracing this way of eating, but then comes the other things, right? The ethical vegan component of it, the care of the animals in the world, because those messages start to filter around you as you start educating yourself about our food system, and you cannot unsee these things. And I think it's just an amazing thing to see the awakening of humans in this realm, and it's just a really fascinating. They're searching for to resolve their pain. What they find is such a more magnificent way of living, and that's just a beautiful thing in and of itself.
Sure. So you said your patients were improving, but from a physical standpoint, besides all the other amazing benefits of going on a plant-based diet, what happened to you physically? Like, because you said you were healthy beforehand, so
Yeah,
what
pretty much
happened?
healthy. Yeah, so when I was, let's see, how old was I? I was 20. Jonathan, my middle one, is 28 now. I have to go back, 26. So when I had Jonathan, I was actually 25, and I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is a autoimmune disease of the thyroid, and I've been on thyroid medications now for 28 years. And I had pretty significant allergies, so I was on different prescription medications back then for allergies, which I'd had since I was a kiddo, right? Other than that, pretty healthy, right? So not thinking much about it. When I went to a plant-based diet, what was really fascinating, my thyroid had been, over the years, it'd stay stable and then increase medication a little bit, and then it'd stay stable and increase medication. When I went plant-based, the first thing I noticed was in the first 90 days, all my allergies disappeared, 100%. I mean, very rarely. I can think of in the last 12, 13 years, maybe a handful of times I've had to use an antihistamine. It's usually because I've traveled somewhere different in places, like, anyway, very, very different than using it daily with nasal sprays, oral medications twice a day. I mean, it was a very drastic way of living. Um, so there was that piece. And then secondarily, about a year and a half later, I developed some shoulder issues, and it was really strange. I was like, I didn't injure myself. We're very active. We did obstacle courses, ran half marathons, full marathons. I'm very active. And what was interesting, my shoulder, it would get to the point that was really stiff. And so I went to a physician, and Basically what happens is you can think of it as kind of like a frozen shoulder adhesive capsulitis is the issue with your shoulder. And like you get to the point that you couldn't even push up my arm, like physically, it wouldn't move. And so it was like, what is going on? This adhesive capsulitis is killing me. So I went to my friend who was an orthopedic surgeon, and he's like, well, there's three things. Being over 40. I was like, well, I was over 40. What can I do about that? Diabetes. Well, I didn't have diabetes. And he goes, hyperthyroidism. I was like, well, that's interesting. I should be, my thyroid should be what we call euthyroid, meaning that it's not I was a hypothyroid previously, taking medication and become what we call euthyroid, where the thyroid's normal. And lo and behold, we checked some labs, and I was taking such a significant amount, apparently, which was the same amount I've been taking the previous years, that was way too much. And so I had to decrease my thyroid medication significantly. Now, mind you, this is like 15 years into being hypothyroid. Nobody in my mind, and I definitely was not expecting to see my thyroid improve. Now, it hasn't fully, completely reversed, but I'm certainly using a much lower medication dosage than I ever had before. And continue to do so. And it's fairly stable now. But menopause throws a few monkey wrenches in things. But outside of that, it's been pretty good. But so the thyroid's been great. So I do keep a very close eye on patients' thyroids as they get better, especially if they're very early in to hypothyroid diagnosis. And that is the best time to really fully reverse it. As you get, longer years, there's less of your thyroid to kind of bring back to life. But that's what happened to me, and went on to have the same thing happen in the other shoulder. It took about 2 years to fully
Wow.
heal my shoulders. I was like, the plant-based diet was great, but boy, it took it wasn't the plant-based diet, but the plant-based diet helped my thyroid, which made my medicine too much. So I got a side effect to too much medication,
Interesting.
was dealing with these shoulders. It's a really fascinating way to discover um, the really true remarkable power of eating plants.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when you stopped eating the animals and the animal products, did you miss them? Like,
Mhm.
did it take a while to get adjusted to eating a different way, or were you completely fine from the beginning?
Yeah, so I have never had an issue with the meat, never. And the dairy, not really, other than, like the dairy milk, because there was almond milk at that time. I don't think they had soy out that was really where I was before, but then now the soy milk. But um I had cheese was, I think, a little bit harder for me in that sense. So it took me a little bit of time to get over the cheese thing, but now honestly, I walk by, kind of grosses me out. Um I can't walk down the meat aisle. Cheese smells like smelly socks, stinky. If you've ever had teenage boys in your house, you know what stinky feet smell like? That's kind of what cheese smells like now. That's what that reminds me of. But no, and there's so many, if you really want something, I mean, there's so many amazing chefs and restaurants and products available now. I mean, there's really no excuse to keep eating animals at this point in my mind.
And when you stopped, how did it affect your relationships? Obviously, you said your husband made the change also, but not your direct
Yeah.
family because they were doing it. But your friends who were eating meat, was there any uh, impact on your relationships with your friends?
It's really funny because it helps having an MD after your name, number one. When you are dealing with individuals who don't know you as well, as far as my other relationships, I think I was just so enthralled, and I get so excited about sharing this amazing way of eating. Like, I get really energetic, and people are just like, whatever you're on, I want that. Right. So I come from a place of love and excitement and sharing. Right. That's number one. Number two is humor. Right. So I had an incident happen with me and a parent. So, when you have kiddos and you're off to doing sports and stuff, so you meet other parents. And one individual, they were raising money for the local football team. And he came up to me, he goes, "Hey Lori, I bought you," they were having a booster and they were raising money. They were selling, actually, beef, actually, believe it or not. Someone had donated uh however many sides of beef, I don't know, to the raffle, to the booster club. And he goes, well, I bought you a ticket in your name for this beef. And he goes, wouldn't it be funny if the vegan doctor won it? And I said, like, wouldn't it be funny if I just donated it to the animal shelter? And then, so those are the kind of things you have to do. You just kind of have to just let it roll off your back. But honestly, um, people, I haven't had patient, relationships end, or now I've certainly had some colleagues who were less, what should I say, less enthralled with my approach, because I spoke to everybody about this. I spoke to hospital administration. We did a study about this. We spoke to the hospital cafe. We ran, made sure that I said, like, when I get put someone in the hospital, and let's say they were in for chest pain, rule out a heart attack or something, I was like, I would write a plant-based diet. They understood what I meant. It doesn't mean eggs, and it doesn't mean dairy. It means eating plants. I would spend hours talking to people. And um, we did a lifestyle medicine clinic I worked at another place in another town called Grand Junction, Colorado, for about 3 months. And that's still going, actually. I left, I think in 2015, if I remember right, 2016. Last I heard, that was still running. So that's been, what, 8 or 9 years now. And so, I spoke to everybody. And I think I had one colleague who, actually, I think it maybe have unfriended me on Facebook if I I would say, "Are you still eating animal products? Why hasn't your doctor told you to stop?" I think I posted on Facebook, and so someone didn't take kindly to that, but that's okay. They don't need to be in my life. That's all right. I've
Well,
I've shared my message, and
there are a lot of
see.
people that I meet where their doctors will immediately reject any connection with diet and health. Do you work, besides physically, people walk into your office or your hospital, but do you work over the phone with people that are looking for, they're not completely away from that, oh, it has to be a medical doctor, but they're awakened enough to know that there is a connection between health. So if somebody was looking for a doctor through the internet or something, do you work like that at all or no?
Yeah, so back in 2020, I started a company called Plant-Based Telehealth, which was providing lifestyle medicine, plant-based physician to everyone across the entire United States. During that course of time, I actually got licensed in all 50 states, which is rare for a physician to do so. It's very cost prohibitive, very administrative burden. Like, I just got an email this morning saying I have to take another jurisprudence test for Maine because am in my third cycle of renewal or whatever. I'm like, like, really? um, but yes, I do see patients via the internet. They can go to drmarvis.com and they can scroll down and schedule an appointment. I don't accept insurance. Insurance is a very difficult thing. So you have to get to get credentialed, excuse me, and accepted in all the different states and all the different ones. I don't accept Medicare. So unfortunately, I would wish I could. If we had a one payer system, I think I could probably do something like that, but we don't. And this is the best I can do at this point. But there's some amazing doctors who do this as well, not just me. So yeah, I'm always
Well,
happy to refer as well. Refer someone in person.
from a standpoint of medications and things like this, obviously some situations call for it and some don't. But you knowing everything you know when you work with somebody, are you able to like write a prescription for somebody if you're working with them online?
Yeah, yeah. Of course, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm still a physician, right? So I still prescribe medications. I take care of people, especially as let's say you have a type 2 diabetic, someone who's dealing with type 2 diabetes or hypertension. As they start eating well and they lose weight or become more insulin sensitive, there's going to be decreasing in medication. So that's an art and science in itself, is de-prescribing medications. So you may need different medications, but there's also, like you said, indications for patients to actually be on medications. So we use the entire toolbox, right? Now, that because I'm plant-based doesn't mean I don't use medications. I absolutely will. Remember, at the end of the day, I want my patients to be well. I want them to thrive and live a long and healthy life as much as possible. Sometimes that requires medications, and there's no harm in that, in the sense of like some judgment, right? And that is one thing that does get to me, is for some reason in our sphere of eating this way, people are almost shamed because they need medication or that they were unable to do whatever there's each person's different. They've lived a different life, they have different genetics, they enter into this maybe way of lifestyle in a different area. So we need to be embracing and welcoming to everyone and not judging and saying, oh, you're not doing it well enough. They're on their own journey. We are not one to judge that. And so that is one thing that we need to be open to all of that. And the more people we get to eat more plant-based, even if they're not fully plant-based, that's to be celebrated, because the more they do it, the more we can pull them in and love on them more, because they're not going to get that anywhere else. And I will tell you, loving someone is going to bring them into this way of eating way faster than judging them and saying, why aren't you doing this? And so that is the one piece for sure. Is the shaming has got to stop on our end as well, at least in my
Sure.
opinion.
So, for you personally, how often would you check your blood work, or do you?
Yeah, so I check mine every year, and I recommend it for my patients annually as well. So, because one thing that I do want to remind people is that just because you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, some people may, like I'll have people who maybe on medications that decrease absorption of B12, for example, or they heard from someone that they don't need B12, right? So that is the one supplement that I do recommend my patients to take regardless, because many times when I'm seeing patients, I've seen thousands and thousands this time of plant-based people. And like my patients are pretty much all plant-based, or wanting to go plant-based over the last, 13 years. So I've got a it's all anecdotal, take it for what it is, but I will tell you, if you get your B12 too low, even in the quote unquote normal range, there can be symptoms of B12 deficiency. So definitely taking the B12 is important. So if anything you measure your B12, make sure it's appropriate. But I check other things as well, just to make sure, especially if I have someone who's dealing with, maybe they had a heart attack history, or again, they have some kidney disease. People come to me typically because they're not well. I do have the worried well, I like to say. These are the ones who've been eating this way for, like yourself, 30, 40, 50 years. They're like, hey, I just want to make sure everything is good, that I'm doing things as well as I could. Especially as we get older and things start to change a little bit, or women going through perimenopause, menopause. There's some things that can happen there that can be pretty frightening for someone who's not educated on what's going on. So yeah, absolutely. I think checking labs, there's no harm in understanding what your body's doing, and tweaking the diet or whatever you need to do for it.
Sure, very good. And on you personally, the only supplement you take is B12, or do you take anything else?
I take 3 actually. I take, vitamin D, because even in sunshine and out all the time running, I was low, and, having a higher risk profile for osteoporosis, didn't wanna do that, and, I take an algae omega-3. Those are the 3 that I take every single day.
Okay. And there's different ways to eat a vegetarian diet, and there's different ways to eat a meat-based diet. And there's a lot of vegan junk food out there today. As a matter of fact, most
Yeah,
people that get off animal products, they're not educated and they're not doing it healthy, and it gives this a bad name. So that's why I try to educate people to say just because you're not eating animals doesn't mean what you're eating is healthy. So I like
right.
that you emphasize whole foods, or whole plant-based foods, because a lot of people either don't know or don't aren't interested in that. So have you found people that have given up the animals and the animal products, but still having major issues because of their diet?
Right. Yes, I think now, especially with all the products that are available, the ultra processed, especially the meat substitutes, are significantly unhealthy. So this is what I tell people. These are transitional foods. If you really feel like you need to embrace that because you're just really struggling with the whole thought of giving up meat, but you want to give up meat, those might be very helpful in a very short period of time. So we utilize those if we have to, just to help someone get until they get more fully educated and understand and start getting recipes. Because I look at people who don't cook. like, you know, we have given up the art of cooking in our own homes, and So that is, there's another whole scary element, like, am I going to be able to cook for myself? Like, I never understood that. I was cooking while I was single digit ages, right? My kids were in the kitchen with me because I didn't have time to cook. Like, you guys help me finish cooking. No. So I never understood that whole dynamic of not being able to cook because they grew up in a home of fast food, or again, that piece is so very critical, that's why people are always searching for recipes. So recipes and physician, that's one thing that I do want to highlight. I run a program called the Healing Kitchen with Brittany Giroudi. She is a young woman who went plant-based about 8 years ago, lost 70 pounds, just had her first fully plant-based pregnancy and baby. He's doing great. But we meet live every Wednesday. She provides these really yummy whole food plant-based diet recipes, and then I answer medical questions, and then I run a workshop once a month for our members. So that's super helpful. But yeah, people who eat these processed foods are going to find that they may be not getting better, or even worse in some cases. So absolutely, you need to embrace the entire spectrum of whole plant foods. The closer it came from earth, the better.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what's your opinion about the carnivore diet?
Um, I think, it's interesting. I obviously am not a fan of the carnivore diet. What's funny is they think that that's going to cure all things when the evidence points the direct opposite, right? So I think people who embrace, extremes, in that sense, they're really searching for something. And so I think that's a place where you need to have the conversation with someone of why are they embracing a carnivore diet? Were they sick? What were they, a lot of times it's GI related, or may hear some people who have a friend who lost a significant amount of weight by going on this type of diet, or they suddenly reverse their diabetes doing this, or type 2 diabetes in particular. I was like, well, if you're not eating carbohydrates, sure. So again, there's different ways, and the point here is that each person got to that point for a reason, and it would behoove us to understand why they got there, so then we can have a conversation that's not emotionally driven, but just out of curiosity and compassion, and understand what they're doing instead of judgment, right? So I think that that's really the key for those individuals. So yeah, I think it's unfortunate because it's causing more suffering. Certainly not good for the welfare of the planet, the human, or the animals. But at the end of the day, there's a reason, and we just need to be better at our art of conversation with folks.
Okay, you mentioned pregnancy on a plant-based diet. Is that
Yeah.
is that a challenge, or is it a very realistic thing for people these days?
No, no, people can do fantastic. Goodness, I've been, how many people now? I've at least 5 or 6 folks that I've kind of helped along with that, and they do beautifully, honestly. Absolutely fabulous. As long as you're making sure you're getting your B12, the omegas and the Ds, that's important for the brain health of the baby, and just growth of that baby. Yeah, and you're eating sufficient calories, they're going to do great, and they're going to find that their pregnancies typically go better. The babies are less sick when they're little, as you're breastfeeding and growing a plant-based family. And bright kiddos, and they do fabulous. They're coming into this world with, they got a, I feel like they're leaps and bounds ahead of other kiddos in the sense of just understanding their health is going to be such a important piece. I think the tricky part for people who have babies and growing a plant-based family from young children is the social dynamics that the kiddos are going to have to deal with. But you have to just be very open in conversation, and just talk out scenarios and come to whatever agreement works best for your family and how to deal with it.
And what about, I mean, when my wife was pregnant with our first baby, she's doing the vegan diet. She was extremely low in iron. So,
Mm,
like, knowing these things in vegans in general can be an issue. Do you recommend,
right.
what do you recommend for iron? I mean, do you just recommend like eating
Yeah.
red foods, or do you recommend any supplementation?
It depends on who it is, right? And when and what phase of their life. So it's not uncommon for women in general, even if they're vegan or not, to be iron deficient, especially if you're having heavy periods or frequent heavy periods. Again, there is a lot going on. Maybe they don't absorb as well. There's so many factors that will really affect your iron levels. So what's interesting when you're checking iron in a vegan or anybody in particular, I would not only just check an iron panel where you're checking your iron, your total iron binding capacity, and your saturation, which is the typical what we call iron panel, but also a very important thing called ferritin. So ferritin is an iron storage molecule. And so when that's less than 50, many times you'll see mostly women, again, because we're having menses, if they're younger than menopausal age, and losing iron on a regular basis, they may require iron supplementation for a period of time or certain times of the month. And this is where blood work is really, really important and very, very helpful. So, in the cases like your wife, I think a really important prenatal vitamin would be very helpful. Um, and again, there's things that different times of life that you might need higher protein, for example, when we get a little bit older to combat sarcopenia, which is loss of muscle mass. But iron is a really important one. Iodine is another important one. So when people go typically plant-based, they many times will go SOS free or salt, oil, sugar free, which is fine. But in the United States and most developed countries, we source our iodine in our food from salt, right? And so we have iodized salt. And so people who remove the salt from their diet just need to really make sure that they're getting a good source of iodine that may need to come in supplement or that can come in, other type of sea vegetables and things as well. But again, you want to pay attention to these things. And it doesn't mean that even on a omnivorous diet or people who eat animal products, that they're not going to have deficiencies as well. I've had more than a few with B12 deficiency. Again, people take medications that inhibit their absorption, or they're having something else going on that's causing it. But again, looking at, I would say, iodine, iron, um, and certainly the B12 are the main focuses for me, as far as saying, if someone's like, hey, I can only want to afford a few lab tests, which one would I get? I would say B12, a ferritin, and then maybe vitamin D would probably be a good one too.
And the other thing you discussed is the omega, the fatty acids,
Yeah.
which some people say, well, you can't get that on a vegan diet, so what are you supposed to do? So you said you supplement with an algae supplement, but they do have it
Yeah.
also in chia seeds and flax seeds. And this is kind of a controversial subject because it's more of a preventative
Sure.
thing. It's not like somebody's suffering now, it's more preventative. And there's a lot of guessing
Right.
on both sides. I saw you had a guest on your show who I recently interviewed, talking about ahi flour. And I believe it
Hmm.
was your show. It was a wonderful interview. And so there's a lot of controversy in this. So I know some
Yeah.
vegetarians that say the only thing I do is some fish oil, and then there's the algae oil.
Yeah.
So, what's your opinion
Yeah.
about this topic?
Yeah, so I totally appreciate that there's controversy and the science is kind of waffling. There's no RDA for omegas. So when you look at a plant-based diet, you absolutely can get the precursor to the long chain, like the DHA, EPA from ALA, right? So these are going to be chia, walnuts, flaxseed, those type of things. So these are going to be higher calorie foods. It's interesting, in a whole food plant-based diet, I will get a lot of people who are fat phobic, and so they won't eat nuts and seeds, which is crazy. And so I certainly have nuts and seeds on a daily basis, but what you can order labs called an omega check. Now, keeping this in mind, they think that most of, like, for example, DHA is actually stored in tissues. So we're not going to do a brain biopsy and get your tissue to see how much you're actually absorbing and storing and creating on your own, because our body will take a little bit of that ALA and convert it to the EPA, DHA, and such. The problem is we don't have a really good understanding of, again, where it's stored, how to measure it accurately, because if we measure it in the blood. Um, but what I do know is just experience working with patients and just in myself. The algae omega 3s have some really interesting data. They're important for heart health, they're important for brain health. And my family history is my biological father had his first heart attack at 38. My mom's dad died at 46. Um, so I've chosen to embrace algae omega 3s just from one, the science is pretty good on understanding anti-inflammatory, good for heart health and brain health, and that. So I take mine as more of an insurance policy. I will say there's been, I would say, a handful of patients, maybe a dozen or so, over the course of the last 12, 13 years to embrace the whole food plant-based diet and began to have some small joint discomfort. Now, it was really interesting when that happened because it was a surprise, right? They didn't have joint pain before. And I was like, okay, this is what I need you to do. So as I started thinking about it, so I need you to start eating walnuts every day, ground flax, and I'd like you to take an algae omega-3. That was it. Oh, and I added a little turmeric and ginger, just in the spice realm. And all of them resolved. And so, it's interesting. Also, when I went on the plant-based diet, I was, eating more of that very strict low fat SOS free diet. My mood actually altered a bit. In the beginning, I wasn't quite as buoyant and happy as I typically was. And what I was going on is I don't think I was getting enough of the healthy fats. And so I started eating more nuts and seeds and I got back to normal and was fine. So you got to be very careful as you become more restrictive in your pattern of eating, that you are getting all the nutrients that you do need. It certainly means that you can do what there's ways to eat. Obviously, you've been eating a healthy raw vegan diet for many, many years. I choose to eat cooked foods because I like cooked foods. And so spending also a lot of time in Colorado. I'm in California now, but I also find it easier. I went all vegan raw in January of this year because my son asked me to with him, and took a lot more time and effort. It was a lot of fun, actually. It felt amazing, but I don't have the time to dedicate to it, especially now with my current lifestyle. But the piece here is just paying attention to making sure you're taking due diligence to make sure you are getting the widest variety of colors and food types that you can.
So is your son all raw now or no?
No, he isn't. He did it for a month with me.
Okay,
But he's really likes to play around with it. So he does mostly raw, but not
sure,
completely. He
sure.
likes his beans.
Like anything, it's a when you have a change, it takes time to get adjusted to. It's all.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
once you get adjusted to it, I mean, it's really the easiest thing to do because just think you're eliminating the time of cooking. And I know there are
True.
people that are preparing the food and putting all the time into that, but that's the transition stage because you're preparing and stuff, making these recipes, but once you do it for a while, now you're just eating a carrot. You don't have to make a raw carrot cake. So,
No, no, that's very true. Yeah, it's true. But I really do. I enjoy my cooked recipes, and so
sure.
yeah, but I enjoy the learning new. I learned a ton of new recipes and products out there that were raw vegan. It was really fascinating. I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah,
And
it's
did you
the
start
whole
learning?
yeah, the whole everything is just anytime something's new, it's exciting. And if you're into learning, I mean, it's just the open world what you can learn. So, what do you think about uh the fellow you interviewed that said, it can't really the fatty acids can't the blood test is not accurate because it's the tissue that counts. So the blood test can be very misleading. What do you think
Right,
about that?
right. I think there's certainly some evidence to that, but am I willing to risk? I mean, for me, for my personal belief, the the small amount of supplementation that I recommend to myself or to my patients as an insurance policy until I get really concrete data is worth it, right? So I have no problem with. I'm not denying that that's certainly there, but I also understand a small amount of supplementation is not going to be harmful. If anything, it might be helpful. So that's how I've chosen to embrace it until we get really more concrete data. This just like going plant based, right? I
Uh,
did more research and then really understood this is a fantastic way of eating. It's more beneficial. But I haven't found any evidence that it to the contrary that I can't or shouldn't supplement an algae omega-3, right? So again, at the end of the day, I'm not killing fish, I'm not taking fish oil, I'm doing the algae. And I've seen it benefit my patients, especially if you have really severe inflammatory like joint type of rheumatoid or some other type of pain, those can be very, very helpful in that sense. So, and given my family history, I've chosen just to embrace that
What do you
supplementation.
think? And with the chia, do you think it needs to be grounded up, or do you think just having it soaked is
Yeah.
fine?
Yeah, I think soaked is fine. The flax definitely needs to be ground, but the chia, as long as it's soaked, you're good.
Now, why is that? Why does the flax need to be ground and the chia doesn't need to be ground?
The chia, as long as it's the moisture, right? So when you look at the data, the moisture and then it absorbs, it becomes more absorbable, right? It's more digestible versus the flax, because of the way the whole of the seed, you're just going to poop it out. You consume it unless you grind it. You're not going to get the absorption that you're wanting.
Okay, okay. Very good. So
Yeah.
the other metabolic test that some people have an issue with, and I know there's the junk food vegans, but what about the cholesterol? So what do you do when you get somebody who's on a
Mhm.
plant-based diet? They're not
Yeah.
doing tons of coconut oil, they're not doing tons of nuts, but they still have high cholesterol. Do you see that in your practice?
Oh yeah, actually I get a lot of those actually because they went whole food plant-based. They're like, I want to go plant-based because to get my cholesterol. And they may have seen, a beginning drop, and then over the years it may have stayed less than ideal, or it may be trending upward just a hair. So you'll see that it fluctuates. It's really interesting. Genetics is going to play a part here, but there's also one thing. I have a cholesterol lowering protocol. And what it is, it's a lot of soluble fiber. So, and it's a timing effect. So there is those individuals, and I've seen total cholesterol and LDL drop, 25%. And I'm not kidding, within 3 to 4 weeks. It's pretty remarkable, but not everybody, but a big portion. So what we do is we take some applesauce, and you can Google it on the video. I have a whole video I talk about it. You can go download it. But it's applesauce, and in there I put some psyllium husk, some ground flaxseed, some cinnamon, because there's also, remember, an apple, it's pectin, right, which is great for your cholesterol. Let's see, we do amla powder, which is just ground up Indian gooseberry, which can help blood sugars and cholesterol. What else do I put in there? That was it for that, I think. And they take that with a couple of meals a day. And then we also add in soy products. So, tofu, tempeh, soybeans, whatever you like, those can grab hold of that cholesterol as it's being recycled. Because when people like, well, why do I still have high cholesterol? It's like, because your body makes cholesterol. That's just how it is. And some people are better recyclers than others. So what we're doing is we're trying to grab it as it's being recycled within the intestine, right? It's coming through, grab it and help escort it out. And so that's what that soluble fiber does. But there's another little supplement from the barberry called berberine that is very, very helpful for people with cholesterol and diabetes. That's a fabulous one. I would say 500 milligrams, 3 meals with each meal. And that is very, very helpful as well. So, again, I get patients who are some very sick people, and you just have to be very mindful of where they're at and what they're doing. And then at the end of the day, sometimes given people, let's say they have coronary artery disease, they've had either a heart attack, or they had, for example, let's say uh, positive CAC score, coronary artery calcium score. They had a CT angiogram, it's positive. So they actually have plaque. If they're embracing a plant-based diet and they cannot get that cholesterol low enough where we're stop laying down plaque, because I'm really good friends with Dr. Kim Williams, who was a past president of the American College of Cardiology. And just, I speak to him a lot about my different patients to make sure that I'm educating them correctly and utilizing medications appropriately. There may be a place for medications, because remember, at the end of the day, I'm not living by a principle, and I'm not going to be offended if someone eats a plant-based diet and doesn't get to the numbers. I'm not going to be blown out of the water about that. I was like, listen, plant-based diet's the way to go, but sometimes you may need a medication. If someone comes to see me and they're 60 years old, they have severe heart disease, I'm not going to say stop certain medications just because they start embracing a plant-based diet. They still have heart disease, and those medications can be beneficial. The science shows that. People can argue with me, but like, the science is the science. This is what we're seeing. These can help save lives, just
Sure.
like a plant-based diet can. I'm not going to argue with someone again about principles just because they want to only believe a plant-based diet's the only answer. It's like, it's a wonderful tool, but it's not a panacea.
So if
But it's
somebody
been amazing.
Yes, if somebody comes to you and they say they don't care about the fish, but they're concerned about their EPAs and or their essential acids, and they want to take a fish oil. It's definitely much more readily available, and it's so much higher than even the algae. Do you have
The
an issue with
yeah.
that? It's not from an ethical standpoint, because I'm in agreement with you, but from a health standpoint, do you
Yeah.
have an issue with fish oil versus algae oil if people couldn't care about the ethical side of it?
I would ask them where they're feeling that they need such a high amount of the fish oil, right? They need to go fish oil. Now, there's certainly some cases, but I think there's other medications. Again, I guess I'd ask them what are they doing it for, right? I think I've had two patients that need to take this really high dose that you can't get from the algae because of some eye issues, and that would be appropriate. There's actually some interesting data with eye health for those particular diagnoses indications. And so, um, but outside of that, I'd like to know understand where and why, so that maybe there's something else going on in their life or their diet that we need to address. But for the most part, most people don't need these super duper high doses.
Okay, 2 more
At least,
topics.
at least in my Mhm.
Okay,
Sure.
2 more topics. So wait, going back to that, so what dosage do you think somebody needs of the omega 3s?
I would say probably around 350 milligrams would be plenty
How
for
many is
most
that
people.
how much is that in grams?
Uh, in grams, I'd have to go back and look as far as
Okay.
I have to
350
go back
milligrams a day? 350
a
milligrams?
day. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the other controversy out there is, and it's not really a controversy, because I started at a place called Hippocrates Health Institute. I don't know if you heard of that
Yeah,
place?
yeah. Down in
So,
Florida.
yeah, so the controversy is everyone pretty much says high fructose corn syrup is really bad, and
Sure.
any sugars, processed sugar is bad. But the common belief is if the sugar's in the fruit, then it's
Mhm.
completely fine because it's connected to the fibers and all the other
Right.
things. So it's great. So
100%.
that's the common belief. But for some reason, Brian Clement, who runs Hippocrates Health Institute, says he found different. And a lot of the people on the carnivore wagon are saying this too. They're claiming that there's no difference if it's fructose in fruit or out of fruit. Uh, what's your opinion about this from your experience?
Yeah, when you look at the data, what does the data say? The data says that when you consume whole fruits, it is absolutely healthy for you, right? So I don't know what they're thinking fruit's going to do to you. What do they think? It's going to cause fatty liver or diabetes? There's zero evidence that that's the way that's going to happen. You eat people eat whole raw fruits or vegetables, but when you're talking about the fruits, I mean, I have people who reverse diabetes, type 2 diabetes, eating a lot of fruit because they miss sweets, right? So we pack them in full of fruits. Now we may do the lower glycemic fruits because we don't want their blood sugars bumping, but they'll absolutely do that. We'll see fatty liver resolve. We'll see people lose weight. So just in my own anecdotal medical practice, fruit is only beneficial. And again, you want to eat a wide variety of fruits and colors, just like anything else, but that's also in looking at an overall healthy plant-based diet. And so, in what I'm typically encouraging patients to embrace is fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grains, nuts, and seeds.
And
Lots of color
when
and lots of different varieties.
when you say the low glycemic fruits, like so the non-low glycemic fruits will, even though it's attached to the fiber and everything else, can affect the blood sugar?
Well, yeah. So depending on the person, right? So let's say that, for example, I've worn a CGM, which is a continuous glucose monitor for 24/7. You wear, tells your blood sugar what it does. I've never had an issue with my blood sugar, right? I'm very insulin sensitive. I'm always been a healthy weight. A1C is always super low. So when I will eat something that is, let's say a super ripe banana, you might see it go up to like 120, right? But if I eat a more less ripe banana, it might budge maybe barely to like 100, right? So again, that sugar content will absolutely cause a fluctuation in blood sugar, which is normal, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with the fluctuation of your blood sugars. Um, the piece of the puzzle here is that I'm dealing with people who are dealing with type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes or very insulin resistant. We don't want those blood sugars to go up because that higher insulin, that unhealthy rise in insulin, well above, blood sugars might hit 200, right? But these people don't have the normal functioning system that someone who doesn't have diabetes does. So if I eat a banana or eat any raw fruit that's maybe a higher glycemic fruit, my body does it fine. It just fluctuates a little higher, but that's just the normal response, right? This isn't anything to be worried about. That's what your body does. Um, but the piece here that I work with my patients is I encourage the lower glycemic foods as we're dealing with insulin resistance. And as they become more insulin sensitive, we will start bringing more of those foods back. That the piece of the puzzle here that we have to balance is, by sometimes someone is actually diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, they've lost about half of the capacity of their beta cells in their pancreas to produce insulin, right? So type 2 diabetes not only makes you insulin resistant, but it kills off your pancreas's ability to make insulin, right? So that's another piece here that we need to understand. So everyone's on a different, like it's a very different. My body's gonna be different from another, 53-year-old woman with even the same weight, height, right? Because genetics and lifestyle and muscle mass and activity levels, stress, sleep, medications, all those things matter. And so the data is really, really clear that when you look at someone who is insulin sensitive, fruit is not going to make you sick, right? Unless something else is going on. Now, I'd absolutely prefer my patients to eat fruit versus some, hyper ultra processed food that doesn't cause the blood sugar to go up. I'd much rather have them have fruit, but then we'd mix it with some vegetables and some beans that keep it low, right? Because when you mix those foods in with vegetables and fruits, it's almost like it slows it down, that absorption, right? And so that will certainly help. So we do a lot of that, right? I have patients who for example, my smoothie. I have smoothie every single morning for years. And when I do the smoothie, my blood sugar goes like this. Like it does nothing. But in my smoothie, it's 75% green leafy vegetables, broccoli, cabbage, all sorts. But then the other part is all fruit. It's pineapple, it's blueberries, cherries, you name it, mango, but it does nothing. It's
So
flatline.
if
But again, it's the vegetables.
if somebody's healthy, they don't have diabetes or anything, do you think it's possible on the non-low glycemic fruits, like the high ones, like let's say mangoes, for example? Do you think it's possible somebody can overeat on them where they can create a problem?
Well, I mean, mean that they're only exclusively eating mangoes?
Well, let's say whether it's mangoes or watermelon or some. I mean, watermelon has a lot more water in it, but even bananas, because there's like this
Sure.
old website, like 30
So
bananas a day. So these people are eating like massive amounts, and a lot of them doing the exercise to deal with it. But still, do you think somebody can get themselves in trouble by? Would you consider that overdoing it,
I
or would
think
you think
anybody,
that's fine?
yeah. So remember, I'm this is where we get into these really crazy extremes, right? So if you're eating an exclusively a banana diet, it'd be like an exclusive pork diet. So you're literally going to be missing out on so many nutrients. And of course, you're going to potentially get yourself in trouble, but not even from the sense of the blood sugar so much is like, what are the nutrients that you're missing? Right. So this is going to be lacking in protein. It's going to be lacking in a lot of very important nutrients. Bananas can be a part of it. I mean, I have an entire stack of bananas right here. I eat a banana a day, but that's not the only thing I eat. Right. So you can eat bananas, but they shouldn't be your exclusive food. Now, what's interesting about humans, we can eat very limited diet for periods of time and survive. That is the way we are made, right? So, but it doesn't mean that's the best diet for you on the long-term health, right? So at the end of the day, what should we be consuming for longevity and decreasing our risk for chronic disease is a whole food plant-based diet with a wide variety of colors and a wide variety of different types, right? So that's the piece here that's so important. Be it raw, but you can still have whole grains, certain whole grains. You're soaking, you're doing your different things and creating them and making them. You can even do sprouted beans and different things, lentils, whatever. you can still get the 4 categories, fruits, veggies, beans, whole grains, and the nuts and seeds. But the piece here is that people take in they get I don't know, they get so far down the extreme. Like just eating 30 bananas a day, yeah, that's going to be a problem. Just like eating just meat all day every day is a problem.
Well, I mean, a lot of people that are switching over to the carnivore diet, they feel all these great benefits. We know there's short-term benefits and looking for problems
Right.
later
These
on.
are definitely short term.
But
Yeah,
the
yeah.
but the but
So
the delusional fact is that they're feeling better, whether it's stimulation or because they're leaving stuff out, it creates in their mind like, "Hey, this is working," and it's a really deceiving factor.
So remember, the individuals who start embracing these really severe restricted type diets, sometimes it's because they walk away from the standard America ultra processed junk diet, right? So just removing that stuff is going to make you feel better. So but then they equate it to just eating this particular way, right? Just a carnivore diet or just banana diet or whatever you want to call it. This very extreme type diet. But over time, that you're going to get the decreased inflammation, you're going to see removing of all that processed sugars, and all that's going to make a big difference for you. But 2, 3, 4 months later down the road, then things start showing up because now the body's like, hey, this is not working for me, because you're not embracing a full variety. The important thing is we got gut microbiome to contend with. You're, I'm sure, very good at understanding the gut microbiome and gut health. um excuse me. But again, there's so much here that each individual is so very different. And that's why this conversation really needs to be personalized. But from the standpoint of what is my foundational diet recommendation is that whole food plant based diet.
Okay, last question here is from a medical standpoint or a personal standpoint, what's your opinion about water fasting, whether it's with dealing with disease or just preventative? What's your opinion?
Yeah, no, I think it can absolutely be a part of a if someone wants to have, water fast as a regular part of their your health, I think that can absolutely be balanced. As long as you're doing, I think also a whole food plant-based diet absolutely can have its place 100%. Yeah, for sure.
If somebody has cancer,
Now, if you
go ahead.
yeah, there's some interesting research on cancer, right? In water fasting. I think True North has some interesting case studies that they're sharing, and I think they've even done some interventional studies. But again, I'm not an expert in just the water fast, but I think if you're going to be doing a water fast, there's a few parameters you need to take into consideration. So anything over 24 hours, especially if you're on medications such as hypertension medications or medications that will affect your blood sugar, insulin, certain oral hypoglycemics, should be under the care of a physician who knows what fasting does to the body. If you're going to be doing it for more than 3 days without even these things, you should also be in some consideration or a conversation with someone who knows what they're doing. And I would say a physician who has some experience working with people who fast on a regular basis, because there can be some changes that can occur after 3 days. And if you're definitely going longer than 3 days, 5 days a week, that definitely needs to almost probably be in person with someone.
Okay, so we know this place like True North. So, as a medical
Mhm.
doctor, if somebody has, let's say, a tumor that's not like an immediate, like blocking an airway or something, or an organ that wherever they're at, would you say to the patient, "Look, we got the standard practice of the chemo and the radiation, but some people have went here and dealt with it this way." Would you even
Mhm.
present that to people, or are you strictly when it comes to, like, later stage of disease, no, go the medical route?
So again, this is where, it's malpractice not to present everything that's in my knowledge base to share with someone, right? So if I have someone typically who comes to see me, they've already been down the traditional route, or they are choosing not to entertain traditional route, right? But this is where the conversation is open and saying, okay, here's our options. Have we optimized all of your lifestyle factors? Are you eating a whole food plant-based diet? Are you exercising? Are you paying attention to your stress, your sleep? So these are the things we do labs, make sure things are there, right? These are the basics, right? So that's step one. Step two is like, what is the next level of intervention? Depending on the cancer and the urgency of the issue, because it really will depend, There may have been a point where they failed. They're like, I don't know what else to do. Nothing has worked. Absolutely. I would send them right over to True North or recommend they seek someone like that, right? And then there's people, maybe they have early stages type of cancer. They're really just wanting to look at all their avenues. I was like, absolutely, call. I don't know all the data on the fasting. That is not my area of expertise. But you can absolutely have conversations with someone who does have the information and knowledge. But again, this is a point where we have to keep an open mind. We're dealing with people's lives here. I mean, literally their lives. Me withholding information can literally change the quality or actually be harmful for someone and potentially hurt someone or kill someone if I don't present, medications or lifestyle interventions. There's so many things here that ethically I have to be presenting everything that I know that's going to be beneficial to potentially beneficial to my patient. That is just a no-brainer in my mind. That's like a you just I the thought of not presenting something like it does I can't. It just doesn't resonate with me. Like I just
Oh,
cannot share
no.
that information. So um again, if I heard someone do well, getting on a plane and traveling to Mars and coming back. You're like, hey, here's what I've heard. You might want to
Oh,
investigate it. Am I going to prescribe it? Probably not. But these are the things that you know, I've learned so much from my patients who come to me with problems. And I'm like, man, I don't know the answer, but let me do some research. And then it opens up a whole nother doorway on how to help patients or maybe another resource that I can refer to them. And then I take that information and embody it in the way that I want to work with my patients and help patients. Because at the end of the day, I really feel that my purpose on this life was, there's lots of purposes, but the main purpose was to help people, right? And get people where they can see it in themselves to help others. Because if I don't live down that path, I don't do well myself internally, mentally, spiritually, physically. I struggle. And so it's a very simple path to stay on for me. I've learned over the years how to navigate that. And so I'm going to make those recommendations. And if other people don't agree with it, that's fine. I don't have to convince everyone that what I do is right because maybe it isn't right. But for right now, that's what I know. But I'm always open to listen and learn. But it doesn't mean I will agree with you, and you don't have to agree with me, and that's okay. It really is okay.
how familiar are you with Hippocrates Health Institute?
Yeah, no, actually, when I was I worked with Dr. Joel Furman. I was his medical director down in Florida for about a year and a half. And yeah, we actually toured Hippocrates and had a meal there. So yeah, it's a really great story. And I'm not as familiar with it more as of late. That was back in, that was like 2016, 17.
Okay.
So it's been, but I don't know if things have changed.
No, no, they're I live right near there, and the reason I ask is just a lot of people that have cancer went the medical traditional route and it didn't work out too well. That's the majority of their patients. Not all. Some people just go there to feel great, but that's the majority of their patients, and they have a pretty good track record, So it's
Yeah,
and
it's
help
been
me.
fantastic.
That's where I learned about eating healthy and everything, and just changed my whole life. And my doctor was like, "No, it's not good for you. It's not good for you." And it's yeah, and raw foods actually isn't good for somebody with colitis unless they're gonna blend it up until they can be able to digest it again. But it's a great place. So listen, it's very unique to find a medical doctor, and I know because of what I do, I interview a lot of people that are in your situation, but it's very unique to find a medical doctor that even considers the complication of diet and what the people are dealing with. So it's such a breath of fresh air to meet you and to interview you. And I will definitely be sending people to you because people want the medical doctor to hear about that. So what's the best way people can get in touch with you or work with you?
No, thank you very much. It's drmarbus.com. So it's DRMARB as in boy, AS.com. And my daughter is actually a physician now, family medicine in Boston, in Cambridge. So if someone needs a doctor in person in Boston, she's pretty amazing herself. So
Oh, really? And she's open to the diet and
yeah.
everything? That's
Yep. Yep. Emily. So there's two Dr. Marvises. She's the Emily and I'm the Lori. So
Wonderful. So, uh, and do you know other doctors in different states if somebody wants to see somebody physically who has this
yeah.
kind of belief system of food definitely
Three
matters?
resources. Yeah, absolutely. I'd say there's three resources. You can check the PCRM website, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Dr. Neil Bernard's got an amazing find a doctor thingy. You can just search. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine. So if you go to lifestylemedicine.org, there's a provider. These are plant centric individuals. They also embrace. So they're most of these folks are going to be plant based or at least open to the plant based diet. And third would be the Plantrition Project. I believe they also have a place that's Dr. Scott Stoll. And you'll go, these conferences are all about plant based nutrition and their medical. I mean, last time I went, there was 2,000 people.
Wow.
So, and most of them were physicians embracing a plant based diet. All of them in, various, journey in their along their own journey, but these are individuals who understand that the current standard and practice of medicine is unsustainable and it's not helping to people to the potential that we could, right? So these are smart individuals stuck in a system that is not working. It's a sick system that keeps people sick, unfortunately. And it takes a lot of courage and tenacity to step out of that system and seek other ways. But it's really hard as a physician to do that in today's world and make a living and raise your family. And it's just hard. And I've been very blessed and fortunate, and understand that many times I made decisions that were out of naivety that was probably to my benefit. And I didn't know all the things that were coming my way. So yeah, those are the three amazing resources to find someone more locally.
Sure. And realistically, how I know you're a busy person, how easy it is to get in touch with you. If somebody contacts you, can they expect a day, a week? Like when do you get back to them? Because if some people are urgently looking to see
Um,
somebody and I tell them to contact you, do I tell them, wait, 3 days, she'll definitely get back to you, or you got to wait a month? Like, where are you at with that right now?
they'll hear from me. My son works for me. They'll hear from us within a day as far
Okay.
as like my availability. I have
Okay.
definitely gotten busier over the last, year or two. I would say if I can't, I will absolutely make recommendations for people who can see you in a probably in a more timely fashion if someone's needing more immediate care. But it's a I'm about a month out right now.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. Before we finish, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I just appreciate you inviting me to be on your show, and it was a delightful conversation. I feel though very one-sided, but really appreciate you and your journey. So thank you for having me.
Okay, well, thank you, and we definitely look forward to having you back more because we have so many more questions. But everybody, post your comments and questions below. I'm going to put the contact information below and the website. And just thank you, everybody, for watching, and thank you again for joining us, Dr. Marvelous.